Hi, I'm Sarah and today we're sewing the Creston Jeans by Cashmerette, which is part of their monthly Cashmerette Club membership program. You can learn more about how to sign up for the club at cashmerette.com/club or find a link in the description. Let's get to it. I'm sewing view A today, but mostly what you'll see is the same things between view A and view B. So unless I mention specifically that that step is for view A or view B, just know that anything you're seeing is for both views. The materials I'm using today are a 10-ounce denim, a lightweight cotton, just a woven cotton for my pocket fabric, and I'm also using it for my binding, which I have cut right here. I'm using a cotton wrapped polyester thread since we're sewing some jeans today, and I also have 2 pieces of cut elastic, which you'll find the links for later on in the instructions. I also have my jeans zipper, and I'm going to be adding a label or 2 as well. Are you ready to sew your best pair of jeans ever? Let's do it. You're going to be interfacing your outer waistbands for either view. So you can see here, my pieces are interfaced. I have this my back waistband and my front waistbands here. There's 2. The other little thing that both views get is the interfacing along this pocket edge right here. All right, so our first step to prep our pieces for sewing is we're going to be doing the pockets, and we need to stay stitch the waist and the side seam or the pocket opening, if that's the side with the pocket opening, along that edge there. So we've stay stitched our waist and our pocket opening on our top pocket, our waist and our side seam on our lower pocket, and our waist and our pocket opening on our pants. And then if you want to also iron a 1/2 inch under on your long side here of your pocket facing, we'll be now ready to sew our pockets. If you like the print of your pocket to show on the inside of your pants, then you can follow the way I'm doing it and orienting my fabric. So I have my pocket facing on the wrong side of my pocket. If you like your print to show to the inside of your pocket so your hands can see it, you want to do it the opposite way. So put your right side up and you're going to put your pocket facing against that edge. So if you've ironed this edge under a 1/2 inch, and now we're going to line it up with the waist and side seam, and we're going to top stitch it down, and we're going to go all the way around the entire perimeter of this piece and secure it to the lower pocket. All right, you're going to repeat for the other side. All right, we're going to sew our top pocket to our pant, and remember, I am orienting the print of my fabric to show on the inside of my pants. So I'm going to put this, looks like I'm putting it wrong sides together, but it's just the print that's wrong sides together. So you're going to put your pocket, line it up right sides together if you're not orienting your fabric this way. And we're going to sew this at a 1/2 inch seam. It's a little tricky at the angle there, so just make sure you're lining it all the way down on that seam line. All right, now we're going to press this to the inside. Well, first I'm going to press it toward the pant, and then I'll press it on the inside of the pant. And I like to make sure that I see a little bit of my pant peeking on the other side, so I know my lining won't show on the right side. Now we're going to top stitch, and we're going to do our first row 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, and then we're going to put a second row 1/4 of an inch away from that. All right, there we go, and now we're going to repeat for our other pocket. All right, if you're sewing view B, you're going to take your top pocket and your lower pocket, and you're going to sew these together from waist to side seam here, and you can do a French seam or a straight stitch with zigzag or overlock it doesn't matter. Just remember to finish the seam edge once you've finished sewing it. We're going to sew the pockets together for view A, and we're going to sew them so that we stop right here at this notch. So we're going to sew from our notch to our side seam here and finish that edge. I'm going to do a French seam. I'm going to angle it to that little notch there. So if you want to follow along, you can do that. I'm going to put this wrong sides together. I know it doesn't look like it's wrong sides together, but technically this will be the inside of my pant, and that is considered the wrong side technically, but we're going to have the pocket print show to the inside of the pant. So it looks like it's right sides together, but technically it's wrong sides together. I'm gonna go around to this notch up here. I'm gonna angle it a little bit, just like this. And if you need to trim this seam down, go for it. I've started my French seam. I'm going to the notch right here, angled in a little bit, and now we're gonna press it. This is always the most awkward French seam to press, so you just gotta do your best. And so I kind of push that seam, like it's really good to just push it, since we could get in there and maybe press the seam to one side, but it's a little tricky, so we're just going to push it from the inside with our hand, and now we're gonna press it right on that seam edge that we just sewed. It's a little thicker at that pocket facing, and that's normal. All right, so we've ironed that edge, and now we're gonna sew our last seam for the French seam to enclose that raw edge. And remember to stop at that notch. And I'm gonna go straight to where I ended there, since I tapered it a little bit. Best I can to enclose the edge, just like that. All right, so now the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to pull down this loose part of our pocket down to that notch there. Just pull it down. And we're gonna trim away right here from a 1/2 inch in to nothing at that notch right there. So I drew a little 1/2 inch mark right there, and I'm just gonna angle it to the notch to nothing. And now we're gonna trim this little corner off of the under pocket. Just like that. So you take off that little wedge, and I'm gonna make it look like the instructions picture. So this is folded down just like this, and then you can see that's the little corner that I removed from that under pocket. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna bind this little edge here, and it's gonna be really easy. Let's cut a little piece that's long enough for this length here, just like that. And we're gonna put this right sides together, right side to the inside of the pocket, just like this. Doesn't matter if you wanna do it from the other side, that's fine too. And I'm gonna put the pocket side up so I can see this little juncture where my notch was. Just place this on the binding, just like this. And I'm gonna sew it at a 1/4 inch seam. And you're gonna see that I'm gonna pull this over here, lining that up, and we're just gonna sew straight down, enclosing that whole notch there, just like that. So we have this piece of binding sewn to the pocket there. This was where the notch was, right here, and where my finished edge is. And now you can trim that down if you like, but if your binding's wide enough, you don't need to. And you can press it and turn it, and we're gonna now enclose it. Nobody's gonna see this, so don't worry if your stitching lands on the binding on the underside. It doesn't matter, it's just your pocket inside. We're creating the hole for the expandable waist to move through. All right, so we're going to press this on at the iron. All right, so we pressed it to enclose this edge here, just like this. Pressed it twice. And we just want that fold edge to go just past that stitching line. But like I said, nobody's gonna see this, so don't sweat it too much. Now we'll just stitch this. There we go. And I'm gonna trim my binding flush with the waist. Just like that. All right, so we're gonna line this all up here, and we're gonna stitch through all layers at our side seam, but we're gonna peel this back here and stitch the top pocket to the waist only, leaving this free. And now make sure you get this lined up. I would line it up and make sure everything's gonna be laying flat once we're in the end stages of assembling everything. And so we're gonna stitch through all layers the pant to this lower pocket here, right here at the side seam. Make sure you stay inside your seam allowance. All right, and then now you just want to press this nice and flat. You're going to repeat this for your other pocket, and it's looking just like this. All right, we're going to sew our fly. So the first thing I like to do is clip to this dot that was on your pattern. So there's a little drill hole right here at the bottom of the fly, and I like to clip first because then I can finish these edges without worrying about going around the curve here if you're using a serger, because you can pull it away once it's clipped. So I'm gonna clip this first, we're gonna finish it, and then we're gonna sew our center front seam. And I like to clip up from there. So right to where that dot is, we're gonna clip right up to there. All right, and now if you want to overlock or bind or whatever you like to do, we're gonna finish the fly separately from one another, but we're gonna do the rest of the crotch together. So first of all, I want you to finish each of your flies stopping at the slit there. All right, we have our flies finished, and now we're gonna put our pants right sides together, and we're going to sew down the center front. So we're gonna use a basting stitch, a really long, easy to take out basting stitch, from this notch right up here at the waistband to the clip. And then you're gonna back tack and switch to your regular stitch length and finish out your rise at the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So remember, basting stitch from the waist. And if you need to draw yourself a line to make sure that you are right up to that clip point there, go for it. I'll use a soapstone pencil here, which I can see. You could also use something like the Hera marker or just any old thing that's gonna wash away, right? All right, so get to there. And then right at that clip, we're gonna switch to our regular stitch length, back stitch, and then finish out the seam. And now we're gonna finish this seam allowance however you prefer. I'm gonna use the serger. All right, and then we have our fly ready to go. So these two layers are together and these two are apart. All right, so our next step, we're gonna press this open, just like this. We're gonna press this open, and we're gonna press this seam allowance though to the left pant. So as you're wearing them, so press the seam here, and I would do this with the iron so it's nice and smooth and flat. I like to tug on this to make sure I get it nice and crisp. Make sure you don't have any weird folds. All right, so here we go, here's our fly. Pressed it to the left. As you're wearing it, the fly is pressed open. Okay, leaving it the way it was pressed, so the fly is open, but the seam down here is pressed towards the left side as you're wearing it. We're gonna top stitch the center front to the right of this seam, so on the left front. So you're only gonna catch one of your fly extensions. There we go. All right, so we're gonna flip our legs so that they're right sides together, but leave the fly pressed to your right here. Make sure the pants are out of the way, just like this. Just like this. So we're going to put the zipper face down. And you might want to give this pant, the bottom one, a little tug to make sure that it's not blumping over into this seam here. And we're gonna line up the zipper tape to the seam there. Not the top stitch line, but the seam. And make sure that your tape here lines up to the bottom of the zipper fly. Don't line the bottom of the zipper down here. Don't pull it down like this, hanging below. The reason that you need this to clear it is that when we go to top stitch our fly, that nice little fly curve on our jeans, we wanna be able to go past the zipper stop here without any worry that we're gonna touch it. So we're gonna line up our zipper tape to the bottom of the fly here. If your zipper is too long, let it hang off at the waist there. And then line up your zipper tape to the center seam there, and we're gonna attach it to the zipper on this side of the tape over here on the right side. So So try and do a nice straight line. It's kind of hard. You can put your zipper foot on, just like that. All right, I switched to a zipper foot because I really want to get closer to the teeth over here. So usually I wouldn't sew this twice, but we're going to get a little closer by using the zipper foot. Zipper foot's a little different on an industrial. It doesn't get quite as close. All right, and now we're going to flip the zipper facing up and just fold it along that seam we just sewed. And we're going to top stitch on the fly extension along the side of the zipper seam here. And I kind of like to pull my tape a little straight, make sure everything is looking straight and nothing kind of winged out a little bit while we were sewing. So it's kind of typical of a zipper to do that. Just like that. And so this is how our zipper is looking. So now I like to turn my pants over just like this. So turn them upside down. And now we're going to make sure that our pants are still right sides together like this. And I'll take this zipper and now flop it over onto the other fly extension so that it's face down again. And now we're going to stitch it to this fly extension here, kind of the same way. We just don't have as much space as we did on this one. So make sure that your pant back here is not like folding into the seam here. I like kind of give it a little tug, and then now we're right directly on top of the facing. You know, basically your fly extensions should be lining up to one another as if they were both their right sides together. All right, and then now we're gonna sew alongside the zipper teeth here. And we're gonna do 2 rows on this side because we really need it to be secure. So this is a high stress area when we're taking on and off our pants. And if you need to lower your zipper, I would do so before you get too close to the top because it gets really hard with a locking zipper, especially this really chunky brass zipper. Try and straighten this back up again and keep going to the top. All right, we're gonna do the same thing, another row, just to give it some extra oomph. I'm a little worried about going past my zipper head here. Just gonna push down to hold it in place so it doesn't move under my needle. And there we go. All right, so there we go. That's how it's looking still. We still have a nice loose zipper, but it's attached to both fly extensions. We're almost done with our fly, so now we're gonna top stitch it, and you have a little template that you can lay on here. Another little helpful thing you can do is you can flip it over here and lay your fly nice and flush to the pant here and use something like the hair marker or something else that's going to give you a nice impression, and you can run it along the fly here. Just try and be accurate with this if you're going to use it as a guide, just like this. And then it should leave a faint divot. On this one it actually shows up pretty good, this fabric here. Some may not show up as well. And now we know that we can't go past that point. We have to stay to the left of it when we do our top stitching. All right, so make sure that you have nothing else in the way here and you're ready with your top stitching. Now the top pole of the zipper, it might push your foot away, so try and be really firm with it and let it know that you're the boss and you want a nice straight line. If it gets wiggly at all, hopefully it's in the seam allowance at the waist there. All right, so let's put in our first row here. You'll get a smoother curve if you don't hesitate or stop too much. All right, so I'm approaching my curve now and we're gonna go around, and we know our zipper stop is like way up here because we put the twill tape to the bottom of the fly. All right, so let's turn. And I'm gonna pivot at 1/4 inch away from the center front there, just as some, like a kind of a decorative way to do my top stitching here. Go down all the way. There's a lot of ways to do this and you can pick however you like to do yours. And we're gonna add bar tacks, but not quite yet. So there's lots of ways to do your top stitching. If you want 2 rows here, if you want 2 rows here, you can do that. And as long as you're staying away from your zipper teeth and you're staying on your fly, you can do whatever you like. You can have a little bit of fun with it. We're still gonna add our fly shield, but I'm gonna add one more row and I'm gonna go on the inside here, straight to the center front. All right, and there we go, I have my second row. Always a little trickier with my zipper foot because there's not a lot of purchase on the material with the foot when it's that narrow. All right, so let's do our fly shield and then we're done with our fly. All right, the first thing we're gonna do to prep our fly shield is we're gonna fold it right sides together and we're gonna sew along the bottom edge here at the seam allowance, 1/2 inch. And then we're gonna turn it right side out. If your denim's really bulky or you're using a bulky fabric, you can trim that corner right here if you need to. We're gonna press, and then we're gonna finish these two raw edges together. All right, we've prepared our fly shield, so we sewed it right sides together, finishing this edge, and then we finished our raw edges here together. And now we're going to line up this serged or finished edge there to this little lip of your fly extension there. And we're gonna line it up so that the waist lines up here. And this should cover up all of your sewing here. And we're gonna sew these two edges together. So don't catch the pant, just catch this little fly extension here. I like to turn it so that the pant is right side up. And yeah, there's a little curve here, so you just go all the way to the bottom of the curve. Keep those finished edges together and go all the way up. Just like that, and trim any threads if you have any. Turn to the right side here, and now here's your fly shield right here, flopping over your whole zipper assembly. And this is gonna protect you and your clothing from your zipper. And now we're gonna bar tack or tack down the fly shield to this stitching of the fly. And you can do this however you like, as long as you're staying away from your zipper teeth and you're catching this fly shield. I'm gonna put it right here inside this stitching here, and I like to do a little fake bar tack with just a few forward and back stitches. Just like that, but you can use a zigzag as well. There we go. There is our zipper fly. The last step is we just need to remove our basting stitches from here down to that original back stitch. I usually try and get it going, and then I like to turn it over and do it from this side where I can see the stitches. This way, if you're using a seam ripper or something else pointy on the right side, you can snag the fabric. And denim, because it has, if you're using a denim, it has a different color warp and weft. The snag can actually pull the fabric and create a little bit of, not a run, but it will have a, make the threads pull, and you'll see that discoloration right there. So try and pull from the back side. You're less likely to nick the fabric. And if you do, it's not as catastrophic. So we'll go all the way down to our back tack. And I try and grab the other side. I can usually see little threads here pulling, and I pull it down here at the base if I can find one. That way I can remove that thread if it's possible. There it is, just like that. And I kind of pull on it real hard, cut it close, and then it sucks back into the fly, and then it disappears. Here we go, let's check out our zipper here. Very nice. Looking good. All right, let's assemble our back leg. So first we're gonna attach the yoke to the top waist here. So we're gonna sew this right sides together, and then you're gonna finish the seam allowance however you like. So remember that the deep part of the yoke is the center back, and the shorter part goes to the side seam here. I'm gonna sew mine right sides together and then finish with an overlock. It's curved, so make sure that you line up on the seam line. Just like that. So now I'm gonna finish this edge. All right, and we're gonna press this seam down, and then we're gonna top stitch it. All right, now we're gonna top stitch on the leg side of the seam. And I'm gonna do 2 rows. Next one, I'm gonna do 1/4 inch away from the first one. So we'll repeat for the other side. All right, so I'm gonna hem my pocket now, and I've already pre-ironed this edge. So I folded it 1/4 inch and then another 1/2 inch. So a total of 3/4 inch seam allowance. And that's my interfaced edge there. And now I'm gonna stitch it from the right side since I have my top stitching. I've also already stitched my motifs on my back pockets. I recommend doing your motifs inside this area away from your seam line and your hem line here. So you can do it before or after it's stitched, but just remember to allow for that hem line up there. All right, now I'm gonna repeat for my other pocket here. All right, and now they're ready to attach the pants. All right, we're gonna attach our pockets to our pants. So I've pressed under a 1/2 inch around the perimeter here, and we're going to line this up using the drill holes on the pattern. And now we're gonna top stitch around 2 rows of stitching, and I like to start upside down. If your corner right here is a little bit messy or you feel like it's gonna sneak out the top, I like to fold it down just like this, kind of tuck it in there. And then when I place it down, I kind of hold it there. And I'm gonna start sewing at this bottom edge here of the hem of the pocket. I'm gonna go up to the top of the pocket, across the top, and then down the pocket perimeter, go around the top of this one, and then do my second row and come back and finish right where I started. And I'm going to close that little turned under edge by doing this. I count my number of stitches across, so I do the same over here. So here I am at this top, and look at that corner is peeking out. So I fold it down just like this. And then now I can close it. If you have a really, really thick denim, like you're at that 14-ounce weight, you might have a little bit of trouble with that. And what I recommend is either hammering it, like with a hammer, or trying to trim that down and get it a little bit tucked down, like pull down that folded edge without folding it over. You just gotta do the best you can on that really thick stuff. I'm going to trim this tail of thread here, and then we're going to meet where I started. And there we go. There's one pocket, and we'll repeat for the other side. So here's a little tip on getting your pockets to be a mirror image of each other from left to right back. So what I do is I don't usually use the pins that mark the pocket on the second one, because now I'm more interested in having them be a mirror image of each other. So I put my pants right sides together just like this, and I'm going to peel this one back. They're upside down to me, and I'm going to line my pocket up to this one here and line up the pocket to that other pant, and then pull my pant over to match this one here. And let's just make sure we actually did it here. So with that, I think it's a little bit off. So see, I peel it back there. I can push this pocket down a little bit. And then now we're going to get a mirror image of our pocket on the other one. All right, now we're going to do our center back crotch seam here. We're going to sew our pant legs together. I'm going to be sewing mine using a flat felled seam, but if you don't want to do that, just make sure that you get your pants together and your center back crotch seam finished. All right, so with the flat felled seam, I start wrong sides together and I sew it at my full seam allowance. 1/2 inch is a little bit narrow for flat felled on denim, but I still kind of just want to give it a try. All right, now I'm gonna, when you are done with your center back seam and you finished it, we're gonna press the seam allowance to the right back and do 2 rows of top stitching, just like we've been doing. So I'm gonna trim my right back seam here for the flat felled seam, so I can press it towards the right back. I'm gonna trim it down pretty narrow since I don't have as much seam allowance, especially at this thickness here. All right, and I'm gonna press this and top stitch it. If I get this too thick right here, I can use the hammer and flatten it a little bit. All right, and then lastly with the flat felled seam, we turn it under and stitch it down. All right, so I've pressed my seam allowance over that raw edge. I hammered this little section right here. It's really amazing what the hammer can do. Just a couple little taps and it's much thinner and more manageable. And I'm just going to edge stitch this ironed fold. There we go. Just like that. All right, so now we're going to put our front pants to our back pants. All right, we're going to sew our front pants to our back pants at the inseam here. So if you like, you can sew these right sides together and finish your seam allowance however you like. You can use French seams or overlock or zigzag, whatever you like. I'm going to do another flat felled seam. It's my last one. So we're going to do these wrong sides together in my case. And I'm going to put a little pin right here at my crotch seam so that I make sure that I line that up. I'm going to start from one hem, go up to the crotch seam, and then down the other leg. And sometimes you'll find there's easing through here, so just make sure you line up your hem to your knee and ease between the knee and the center seam, the crotch seam right here. So once I get to this halfway point of the crotch seam right here, I reorient my other leg, and so I make sure that I have that knee notch pinned here. Because if there's any easing in jeans between the knee and the crotch, you don't want the knees to get unaligned and then your hems won't match. So you want to make sure that the easing happens in the right spot. Most of the easing that happens there is imperceptible. You won't even notice it. It's not hard. And it's because your back crotch is so stretchy without all of that bias happening there. So it's really easy, and it's really easy to miss and not realize that you're doing it. And then you might get a little bit extra at your knee. So it's good to know about it. Or just at least make sure that it doesn't happen. Once you're done sewing your inseam together, you're going to want to top stitch that seam, and I would press it toward the front pant and top stitch it. All right, so now we're doing our top stitch. I'm doing my second seam of the flat felled seam, but we're going to stitch this towards the front leg. Again, if this is really thick right here, use a hammer. It makes a big, big difference. Just a couple taps. It'll squish it down. There we go. Nice flat seam. All right, let's do our side seams. All right, now we're gonna sew the side seams together, and this will be a good time to check the fit if you like. So if you want to do that, I would baste your side seams together. I'm gonna be sewing mine without a basting stitch, so I didn't want you to skip that step just in case you wanna try it on your jeans. All right, so I'm gonna line up my side seams here, and we're gonna make sure we catch our pocket side here, the side seam next to the pocket opening. So your full seam allowance. And the thickness right here at the bottom of the pocket opening might push your presser foot a little bit away, so hold firm right there. I'm gonna do both side seams, and then I'm gonna finish my seam allowance. All right, we've got our seam finished on the side there, and now we're going to top stitch the side seam, but we're only going to go to the bottom of the pocket bag. So you want to open up the pant here, And we're going to press the seam allowance toward the back. And now we're going to find the bottom of the pocket bag. It's right here. I can feel it. Just put a little pin there so I don't doubt myself. And we're just going to stitch down there. And if you want to put a bar tack there, you can as well. All right, so there we go. And now you're going to repeat for the other side. All right, it's time to sew the waistband, and now is the time where you're going to choose view A or view B. I'm sewing view A of the expandable waist, but if you're sewing view B, I'm just going to walk you through a few ideas so that you kind of have a better visualization if you're following the instructions. So these aren't the view A pieces. We're going to pretend like they're the view B pieces, so I can give you a little bit of a rundown. So you're going to sew your front waistband to your back waistband at the side seams here. You're going to do your inner waist and you're going to do your outer waist. And so then we'll have two separate waistbands. All right. Next, we would take these right sides together, just like this, and we would sew along this interior curve right here along the waist all the way down at your seam allowance. This isn't gonna fit perfectly, but it's gonna give you kind of an idea. And I do have a little method that I like to do for things, especially if you're not that keen on sewing waistbands or you have trouble getting a nice finish at the very end. All right, so now we have our waistband and it's sewn right sides together just along the top curved edge, not along the short ends down here. All right, now I would press it, get a nice crisp seam there, press it nicely. If you're adding belt loops, you need to make sure that you add those right now so that they're all tacked to the places on your waistband where they need to go. All right, so now this is where I do things a little differently. I like to sew cuffs and waistbands and things like that are like bands. I like to sew them from the inside of the garment to the outside of the garment. And so what I do is I take that inner waistband, the uninterfaced one, and I would line it up to the inside of my pant here. And so I would hang off the edge here, the seam allowance, the 1/2 inch, right? So we'd hang off a 1/2 inch there, and we're gonna sew this inner waistband all the way around the whole waist, matching our side seams and our notches and things like that. And then we're gonna have a nice, clean finished inner waistband. All right, now when we pull our waistband to the outside here, remember you might have belt loops hanging down there as well. You're going to pull it to the front, get a nice crisp edge along the top edge of your waistband here, fold it really nicely, and then turn under this edge. And you just need to make sure you cover up any of the seams and stitching that you did here. Now, because the inside is already sewn and it's already finished, we don't really have to worry about if the needle's gonna land on the inner waistband in the same place it lands on the outer waistband if we're sewing from the outside. So that's the way I like to finish it. Before you sew it though, you're gonna want to put your ends here, right sides together, and sew straight down. I like to leave this edge hanging down. I don't fold it up because it kind of causes problems sometimes if things aren't lining up very well. So I like to sew this seam right here. You'll have a 1/2 inch seam. I didn't even pin very accurately today. So straight down, trim your corner, turn it right side out, and then now you'd have a finished edge there that's sewn. And now you can fold under this edge and pin it and make sure you don't get any torquing in your waistband. Line up your side seams, your center back, things like that. And then now edge stitch from the right side of the garment. This way you don't have to worry about where the needle is on the inside, and it looks really good from the outside because you get to see all of the stitching that you're doing and you get to control how it looks. So hopefully those tips help you, and congratulations on sewing your jeans. All you have left are your hems. All right, it's time to sew the view A waistband. So the first piece we're going to use is the inner back, which is this one right here. We're going to stack our others and push them aside. And we're going to mark our notch kind of away from this raw cut edge so we can still see it, because we're about to finish this seam allowance and we won't see it once we are done. So let's mark our notches here. And now we're going to bind this lower edge. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew our binding right sides together. All right, now we're going to press the binding to the other side, just like this, wrapping it around the raw edge. All right, there we go. Looks really nice, doesn't it? Okay, we have a raw edge right here. And now we're going to stitch in the ditch. So we're going to try and stitch right in this seam that we just sewed with the binding. Make sure you can see your notches peeking above this bias seam. There we go. All right, and if you need to trim this down, you can, but it's okay that it's a raw edge. Bias doesn't fray, so it's going to be just fine. And then trim your binding here flush with your seams, just like that. All right, on your outer back waistband, the one that's interfaced, we're going to sew 2 3/4 inch lines parallel to each of these raw edges. So one's parallel to this edge, one's parallel to this edge. I have a mark on my throat plate marking the 3/4 inch. If you don't, you can put a piece of tape there. All right, and now we're going to do it from the other raw edge. There we go. All right, now we're going to fold these short ends in 1/2 inch and we're going to press them. All right, you want to grab your waistband extension. We're going to use it in a second. All right, so let's take our inner back waistband. I'm going to straighten it out here, and we're going to line up our outer back waistband on top, centering it on the notches and the center back. And now take one of your waistband extensions. This is the wider end here, right? And we're going to lay this lining up to the side seam here, and it's going to overlap on top of the outer waistband here. So just flop it over just like that, and we're going to pin all this in place. And we're going to do the same over here. Make sure all this stays nice and flat and centered. Line up this waistband extension here, just like that. All right, it's looking like this, and now we're going to sew along this interior curve, the whole seam, at your 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to tack these together here, just the outer waistband to the waistband extension here, and your folded edge here should line up with that notch. So let's turn this over just like this so that we're not distorting anything. We can just lift this up just like this. That's the inner waistband, right? Push it aside. Try not to let this go like this. You don't want it to splay apart. Keep this nice and firm. You can pin it. And then we're just going to sew those together, 1/4 inch seam or inside the seam allowance. Just like that, and repeat on this side here. Just like that. All right, now we're going to open this up and we're going to press this seam. We're going to press the seam allowance toward the inner waistband. All right, now we're going to understitch the seam allowance toward the inner waistband. All right, now open up your waistband here and we're going to press in 1/2 inch right here on either side of the inner and outer waistband. This is the extension here in the inner waistband. So we're going to press both of these in 1/2 inch, and then we're going to press our waistband together folded. All right, so it's looking like this. So the outer, and here is the inner. All right, now we're going to set this aside and we're going to work on our front. We're going to do the same top stitching 3/4 inch from the raw edge on either side. All right, I'm going to repeat for the other edge here. And we'll repeat for the other waistband. Referencing the chart on page 37, cut a piece of elastic according to your size and place this on your outer front waistband. your right hand one, and we're going to baste it in the side seam here. Just like that. This is the wider end, this is the narrower end. All right, within your inner front waistband, piece 13, we're gonna do the same thing we did on the inner back. We're gonna mark our notches so that we can see them once we bind this edge here. And note that the one that's closest to this narrow end is labeled letter P, and this is what we're gonna bind to. We're gonna bind to this little notch here. All right, so we're gonna get our binding, and we're gonna sew this right sides together. I'm gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam. And you can just cut the binding, you can just cut the binding flush with this little notch here, or you can, you know, hang it off maybe a 1/4 inch and turn it under if you like. Like I said before, binding doesn't fray, so you don't have to turn it under like this, just like that. And now we're gonna press it to the inside. All right, we're gonna stitch in the ditch, so we're gonna stitch right there in that seam, catching the binding on the other side. There we go, just like that. All right, refer to your inner front waistband pattern piece and find the buttonhole that corresponds to your size. And I just folded my paper and trimmed away a little hole there. And we're gonna make a buttonhole on our inner waistband here. And we needed to be able to fit our elastic. So let's draw our elastic length here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make it's called, like, officially called a Spanish snap buttonhole. Basically, I'm just going to make a faced buttonhole using a little piece of fabric. So I've interfaced this piece of fabric, and I'm gonna just make it a little bigger than my buttonhole. A buttonhole is perfectly acceptable. My industrial machine doesn't do that, so I've come up with lots of different ways to do things without having to get my machine out to do a buttonhole. So I'm gonna center this over my buttonhole here, but I'm also gonna mark exactly how big I need this. So I'm just gonna fold my fabric here. And I absolutely need my elastic to be able to fit into this hole. All right, so let's put that right there. Oops, flip it over. And I'm gonna sew something that looks a little bit like this, you know, kind of like an eye. I'm gonna use a smaller stitch length, and I'm gonna start above. I'm gonna do something like this. Like that. Make sure it's right over my buttonhole. I'm gonna make it narrower than that. I'm just making it big so you can see it. I didn't really give myself much fabric there at the bottom, but I'm gonna stitch it down. It's gonna be fine. I'm gonna trim this a little bit so I don't have such a big piece of fabric in here. And now I'm gonna slit this open and make sure I get right into that upper bit there, like this. And now I'm gonna turn the fabric to the inside. And the snap of Spanish snap usually comes at this point, but I don't think I gave myself enough fabric to do that, where you're gonna give it a good little tug at either end here to get a nice little snap. So let's press my buttonhole. All right, and there we go. I have my buttonhole there, and now I'm gonna stitch around my fabric. I'm gonna trim my binding down right here. I kind of like that it is sort of covering up the bottom there, but I don't want it to peek through the hole. So we'll just trim it a little bit. And now I'm gonna stitch around like just a 1/4 inch or something. Just something to hold that facing down. Just like that. Give it the true test here. Perfect, just like that. All right, so you're gonna, again, consult the elastic chart for another piece. It's gonna be a different size, don't cut the same one. And you need your pattern piece one more time. And we're gonna find our elastic marking on here. So I know mine's 1, 2, 3, and I'm just gonna fold it on that, those 2 dots there. All right, so let's line this up on here. And I'm gonna fold it back on that spot there. And that is where my elastic goes. And it should line up with your buttonhole, just like this. All right, now we're gonna secure this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you wanna make sure this is secure. So sew over it a few times. Make sure it's nice and secure, just like that. And we'll trim our threads. Your elastic will extend over the buttonhole a little bit. All right, there we go. Feed the elastic through the hole, just like that. Okay, now pin the inner waistband on top of the outer waistband, just like this, lining it all up on the edges. And we're gonna sew all the way around on our raw edges. We're gonna start here at the center front waist, go all the way down the waist, down the short end, and up to where we sewed our binding. So 3 sides here. Make sure you don't catch this piece of elastic here. And just gently pull it out of the way, and I'm kind of feeling right here where it is so that I can pivot right on that next to that elastic. Let's go a little further down, maybe one more stitch. Pivot again, and again, I don't want to catch the sides of the elastic, so I'm just going to nudge them out of the way a little bit. Let your presser foot ride along the elastic if that helps. Just don't catch it with your needle. And we're going to go up to where the binding is sewn, just like that. Now we're going to clip up to where we stopped, right there at the binding. And now I'm going to trim these corners here. And we're going to press this seam, leave it unturned, and we're going to understitch as far as we can go onto the inner waistband. So let's go press that. And now we're going to understitch the seam allowance toward the inner waistband. And we're going to go as far as we can down here towards the center front. You're probably going to get about 3 inches away from the center front. There we go, just like that. And now we're going to turn this right side out. Kind of looking for that elastic so I can grab it and it'll help me. So once you grab that, you can grab it like this. Hopefully your elastic didn't get caught on the sides. And I'm going to turn this just like that. All right, and now we're going to press this. All right, and there we go. Here is one of the waistbands. And now you're going to repeat this for your other one all the way to this point. All right, this is where we're at now, and now we're going to attach the waistband to the pant. All right, we're going to work on the left front as you wear the pants first. So we're going to open up the zipper, and we're going to take our left front waistband, and we're going to put it right sides together. This notch right here on the waistband, it goes to the edge of the pants right there. See that little notch right there? I'm going to line that up right there on the seam line, just like that. And then the pocket opening right here goes to our notch right there where we ended this little extension on the front waistband here. So we'll line this up just like this. And you want to make sure you leave the under pocket free. We're only doing this top portion here. Now I'm going to sew this with the pant up so that I can see the teeth of my zipper since they are creeping into my seam allowance. So make sure that you don't sew your teeth. You can walk your hand wheel. I'll show you just how I'm going to do it. And we don't want to catch our inner waistband, so I'm going to fold it away just like this. So we're going to start here, put this edge of the pant up to right here at this notch. I'm gonna pull my inner waistband a little bit firmer. And once I get this under the machine, it's gonna be a little easier to manage because the machine's gonna hold it for me, just like that. All right, and we're gonna sew. All right, we're gonna sneak the needle between the teeth, just like this. Use my hand wheel and I turn it toward me. And we get to the front here and we backstitch. And remember, the front pant goes right to the notch on the waistband. All right, and now we're gonna press the seam allowance up into the waistband, just like this. Now we're gonna fold the waistband right sides together, just like this. And make sure that you fold it along the seam, right sides together like this. And try and get this nice crisp edge here. Feel that seam in there. And I would go for a little bit further like this because we really don't want to get any torquing. We want this nice and flat here so that when we pull our waistband nice and flat like this. So essentially we're going to be sewing straight down like this, just like that. And we're going to cut all that off. And we just want to go right next to our front there. So make sure you have a nice folded edge there, right on the seam. Just like this. Fold this up like that. Leave this hanging down. And now we're going to trim all this off. And now we're going to turn it right side out. And we're going to poke this corner out best we can. Just like that. And now we're going to make sure your seam allowance is up into the waistband, and we're going to turn back this little corner here. Spend a little time getting it nice and tidy right there. Get all those little threads in there, edges, things like that. And if this edge isn't pressed nice and crisp right here, this seam, make sure it is because you don't want any of your waistband kind of blumping over down. It's really hard to tell from the inside. All right, and then right here, same thing, we're gonna angle this. So just kind of push it and angle it a little bit, like that. And we're gonna go for a little ways here. So turn it under. We don't want this bound edge to interfere with our zipper here, so we're just gonna fold this under for a little ways till we get like just past the zipper, something like that. That'll work. All right, now we're going to stitch in the ditch from the right side, so make sure any pins you have are perpendicular to the seam. And remember to not sew through your teeth without a lot of care. So we're going to stitch right here in the ditch, so try and pull this apart the best you can. It's kind of tough on a waistband seam. And make sure nothing else is getting caught. So we're going to pull all the rest of the pant, just going to swipe it under there like that. And we're in this little fly section here, so I can sew freely for 1/4 of an inch, maybe back tack like that. I'm using contrast thread, so my stitching's probably going to show even in the ditch. You can hand wheel, turn your hand wheel towards you, do the whole thing like that if you feel more comfortable with that. Okay, this is my teeth right here, so I'm definitely going to hand wheel through here. Make sure I don't hit a single tooth. Even if you're hand wheeling and you hit a tooth, you need to make sure that you don't weaken the thread right there. And you can probably finish sewing your seam, but you should definitely change your needle after that because you will probably have a little barb on the end of it. And that'll just cut your thread as you sew. All right, and then just keep going in your ditch there. I can feel this other pin. I'm going to pull it out. I feel confident that I can hold this the rest of the way. And there we go. It looks like I went onto the waistband a little bit right there. I can probably clean that up later if I want. All right, and here we go. It's all clean finished there. A little messy back tack that I can probably clean up a little bit later as well. All right, now let's look at the other side. All right, we're gonna do the same steps with our other front here, our right front. The only difference is that this waistband is gonna go all the way to the end here. We're not gonna lop off that chunk when we do the second step. So let's put our waistband to our front here, lining it up same way. So the pocket opening here goes to this clip here where we stopped sewing our binding, like this. And you're going to match your notch on your waistband to your center front. All right, so once you have your waistband lined up to your center front here and your pocket opening there, you can sew just like we did all the other steps. Just repeat that for this front. All right, so we have our right front waistband on here, and now we're going to fold it right sides together. And I'm going to sew this from the inside so I can see the end of the facing here. So just make sure that you're not folding this like this, like with the ridge of the understitch like that, putting the fold on the right side of that. You want to make sure you fold on that seam line. And I like to get it folded pretty firmly along this edge for a little bit, so I make sure I'm getting a nice right angle. I didn't end up with a full ½ inch there, and that's probably because my interfacing probably shrank my fabric a little bit there. So, all right, and so now I'm going to trim this corner here. And now you're going to continue in the same way, pressing your seam up into the waistband, tucking the binding at an angle, something like this. You want it tucked at an angle because if you don't, this little edge will just flip out like that. So just angle it up so it gets caught in there. Be really firm with your fingers. Let's make sure our waistband, our elastic still is poking through. And like I said, be firm with that. Turn the binding. Clean this edge up a little bit if you need to. Let's poke everything in there. Looks like my back stitch is a little messy right there. Just be really firm with it. Make sure it's all nice and flat, just like that. All right, and then we're gonna stitch from the right side in the ditch, and then we'll put the back on. All right, now time to attach our back waistband. I just created a little notch right here so I knew where the center was by just folding it in half and finding that center. So that's going to be really helpful. And now we're going to line this up on the seam. And for a flat felled seam, it's not this edge where we top stitched, it's the first seam there. So that's why it might look like I'm not doing it in the right spot. We're doing this right sides together, so outer to the waist of the pants. All right, so we have all of our notches lined up here. We have the center back that I put that notch there on my waistband to our center back. We have the notch on our waistband here going to the notch of the yoke here, and your end of your extension is going to line up with the end of your pocket, bound pocket opening here. And we're going to sew this at our ½ inch seam. So if you're thinking about adding any labels, now's a good time. All right, I'm going to pin it out of the way so I don't catch it with my seam. Like that. All right, now we're going to go press this seam allowance up into the waistband. All right, now we get to do the fun stuff. We're gonna thread our elastic through this little gap that we created a while ago, just like that. Turn around. Make sure you don't twist anything. We'll pull it through there. When we get it all pulled through here, the pocket is going to lay flat. So we're going to arrange our pocket here. I know it's feeling like you got a lot of pant going on. So let's get our pocket nice and flat here. We'll pull our waistband. Maybe we'll pull a lot of it, so that way we can kind of arrange this so that it lays flat, just like that. So we're going to pull the waistband down over the elastic here, but we want to attach the elastic to the inner waistband here. So here is how it's looking right here, right? So we have our waistband coming through, our elastic extension here coming through. We're going to line it up to that mark. I had to get my pattern piece out and find those dots again. So there it is right there. And now I'm going to lay my inner waistband over. Make sure you get this nice and your inner waistband nice and flat like this. And now I'm going to pick up only the elastic with the inner waistband here, just like this. Reach in here and pick it up just like that. I did my markings on my outer waistband, but you're sewing it to the inner waistband, and that's the pattern piece I use to find where that marking is. So just like that. And then now we're going to sew this at a 1/2 inch seam on the elastic, really securely, to our inner waistband, the one with the binding. I got a little overzealous with my tack there. And let's just make sure nothing's twisted. You can hold that with a safety pin first too if you want, or a pin, and make sure. Look at that. Magic. All right, so now let's repeat on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to have my pant wrong side up, and again, I'm going to pull my pocket up over here just like this, and I'm going to slip my elastic into this casing that we created, and making sure, look, it's nice and flat. I'm not twisting it. I lift up my inner waistband, and I pull the fabric through the hole too, and go all the way to that mark right here. We can even pin it there, right? And make sure that the pocket's laying flat in that position, just like that. So it's looking pretty good. All right, and now I'm gonna secure it to the inner waistband. So right now it's pinned to the outer waistband, the one that's interfaced, right? So we're gonna put the inner waistband down over it, and like I said, make it kind of nice and flat for a waist so that you know you're getting this waistband in the right spot. And now I'm gonna pick this up. I'm gonna pull out my pin. Pick it up, flip it, just like that. And then we're gonna stitch it to the inner waistband only. And very securely as well. All right, there we go. All right, so now we're gonna sew our waistband closed, and we're gonna do this in a couple of phases because we can't just sew straight through here now that we've attached our front to our back, right? So we're gonna do this in steps. So we're going to fold up the seam allowance up here, and don't turn back your corner this time. So keep your seam allowance pushed up into the waistband. And I'm going to go around and kind of flatten my waistband so that it's nice and flat, and so I know I'm not getting any twisting or torquing. And I'm just going to pin it in a few places and make sure that's where I'm going to want to secure it. See, this one's separate. Do this one by itself. Don't turn this at an angle this time. Just leave it flat like that. Just turn back just like that. And then I'm going to flip this around upside down. It's a little easier to work with. I can peel back the front of the pant. Get it nice and flat, like I'm smoothing it into the curve like that so that I know that's where the waistband needs to go. I know it's awkward. There's another spot right there. And we'll do a couple on the front side over here. And you want that little hole there, so don't go ahead of me and close that quite yet. And we'll put one more in between the center back and the side seam. See, I'm kind of stretching it, making sure it's nice and flat. All right, let's just give it a once over, see if anything looks fishy. It's looking pretty good. All right, and now when we sew this, we're gonna sew this in 3 steps. We're gonna sew this little front section as close to the side seam as we can get, and then we're gonna sew the back and then the other front. So let's do the back first. We're gonna do this from the right side, and we're stitching in the ditch. And see how this is separate right here? See, that's why we can't go through this, right? So we're just gonna go as far to the front as possible. I'm just gonna go to the side seam though. It's okay if we don't get all of the waistband. It's gonna be secure no matter what. And this is really thick through here. So if you need to use a hump jumper or something like that, or something to compensate for the thickness. All right, and so we're just stitching in the ditch, going along here. Coming around the front. Don't catch anything else. Pin right. I'm gonna pull this pin out right now since it's so thick through here anyway. Okay, so we have the back is secured, and now we're gonna do the front, and this time we're gonna pull this out of the way the best we can. So we're doing this under pocket here. Make sure this little opening doesn't get too big. Your elastic is going to need to fit in this little hole right here. All right, and so we're peeling this front waist back here, right? And we're probably only going to be able to get up to the casing where the elastic went into the fabric, or into the casing right here. So I got up to here. So I have about a 1/2 inch gap, and that's okay. Our waistband's plenty secure. That's not going to be a problem at all. All right, let's do our other front. I'm going to start from the front again, and remember I need a big enough gap to hold my elastic, so I'm kind of being firm about holding this open a little bit. Looking good, right? Now we just need to connect this to our outer waistband there. All right, this is our final waistband step. So we just need to secure this last piece of elastic into this other casing that we made. So we're going to line this up. So make sure that, you know, everything's lined up there. You want this buttonhole to line up with this end here. And we're gonna stick our elastic into this hole. I'm gonna stretch it so I can get it in there. And I'm gonna insert it in there. It might be a little tight. I know one of mine's gonna be kind of tight. And we're gonna edge stitch the elastic into this little hole here. So I'm sticking it in there, trying to make sure that I've got it evenly in there top to bottom. I'm gonna hold it firmly, put it under the needle, and secure it. Edge stitch the opening here with the elastic inside. Just like that. And we'll repeat for the other side. All right, let's take it for a test drive here. Check it out. Look at that. Nice job. Time to be comfortable when we sit, right? All right, let's hem our pants. And I'm going to start on the inside, on the inseam here, and I'm going to turn it 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch. So I've pressed my pants 1 inch up, and now I just need to turn it to the inside. Turn it one more time. Well, good job. You only have a couple of things left. You just have all your hardware and your buttonhole. So if you want to add rivets, I suggest you put them at all the high stress areas at the minimum. So places like the top of your pocket, bottom of your pocket here, these are all high stress areas, and that's what rivets are best used for. And when you install them, just be really confident. A couple of hard whacks and it's probably all you need to do. And then don't forget your button and your buttonhole here. Make sure you've tried them on and everything fits just the way you want. I bet they look great and I can't wait to see them. Thanks for sewing with me. Have a good one.